In the deep space, humans are known as the galaxy's most dangerous species. They call them Deathworlders. Commander Vax was a veteran of 100 battles, but today, his hands were shaking. He had to check a human's homework. Inside, the human sat perfectly still. He looked like he was under a spell, or a curse. Vax looked down at the desk. There, on the secret documents, lay a tiny, orange monster. The creature began to vibrate. A low, terrifying growl that shook the very air. Vax froze. Is this a biological weapon? Or something even worse? The human whispered, "I can't move, Commander. I'm trapped." The hallway of the Great Galactic War Academy was cold, long, and made of gray metal. Most aliens walked here with pride, but today, Commander Vax was trembling. His boots made a heavy clicking sound against the floor. Vax was a powerful alien with 4 arms and skin like a lizard, but his heart was beating very fast. He was holding a digital pad in his shaking hand. Today was the day he had to check the homework of the newest student, a human named Leo. In the entire galaxy, everyone knew about humans. They were called Deathworlders. Their home planet, Earth, was a place of nightmares. The gravity there was so strong it could crush a normal alien's bones. The air was filled with wild weather, and the animals were all monsters with sharp teeth and poison. To the rest of the galaxy, a human was not just a student, a human was a living weapon. Vax had heard stories that humans could break metal with their bare hands and run for miles without getting tired. He did not want to go into that room. As Vax walked, he passed other alien students. They were all whispering. They saw his face and knew where he was going. Some of them looked at him with pity. They thought Vax might not come out of that room alive. Vax took a deep breath. He tried to remember his training. He was a commander. He was supposed to be brave. But every time he thought about the Deathworlder inside the room, his knees felt weak. He reached the door marked Room 402. This was Leo's room. Vax stopped in front of the door. He could hear a strange sound coming from inside. It was not shouting. It was not the sound of a struggle. It was a heavy, deep silence. This was even more terrifying. He thought, is the human preparing a trap? Is he building a bomb? Vax wiped the sweat from his green forehead. He used his key card, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. He stepped inside, expecting to see a room full of weapons or the smell of blood. The room was dim. Human Leo was sitting at his desk, perfectly still. He did not turn around when the door opened. Leo's back was straight, and his head was down. He looked like he was under a lot of stress. His hands were gripping the edges of his chair. Vax felt a chill. Why was the Deathworlder so tense? Was there an invisible enemy in the room? Vax moved closer, his eyes scanning every corner. He looked at the floor, then the bed, and finally, he looked at the desk where Leo's tactical homework was displayed on a glowing screen. Vax froze. His breath stopped. His 4 eyes grew wide with pure terror. Right there, in the middle of the desk, was a creature. It was small, very small. It was covered in bright orange fur with white stripes. It was lying directly on top of the human's important military papers. Vax had never seen anything like it. It looked like a tiny tiger, but it was soft and round. Its eyes were closed, and it looked very peaceful. However, Vax knew the rules of the galaxy. The smaller the creature from a death world, the more poisonous it usually was. The silence of the room was broken by a terrifying sound. It was coming from the orange creature. It was a low, vibrating growl. The sound was so deep that Vax could feel it in his own chest. To Vax, this wasn't a happy sound. It sounded like a machine getting ready to explode. It sounded like a biological weapon charging up its energy. Vax thought the creature was about to release a cloud of toxic gas or perhaps jump and bite his throat. Vax looked at Leo. The human looked down at the orange creature with a look of total defeat. Leo whispered in a low voice, "I can't move, Commander." I'm trapped. Vax's heart skipped a beat. If a powerful human was trapped by this small orange monster, then what hope did a lizard alien like Vax have? The commander took a step back, his hands raised in the air. He realized that the orange creature was not just a pet. It was the master of the room. The tiny creature let out a small sigh and moved its paw. Vax saw the tiny, hidden white claws for a split second before they disappeared back into the soft fur. He gasped. Those were not just claws, they were needles. The cat cub was snoring, but to Vax, it was the sound of a ticking bomb. He realized he couldn't check the homework. No one would dare touch that desk. The legendary Deathworlder had brought a tiny, orange demon into the academy, and it was currently sleeping on the most important documents in the building. Vax was too scared to even move a finger. Commander Vax stood frozen, his 4 eyes wide as he looked at the small, orange, furry ball on the desk. He felt a drop of cold sweat slide down his neck. To any human, this was just a cute ginger kitten. But to an alien who grew up on a peaceful planet, this was a mystery from the most dangerous place in the galaxy, Earth. Vax slowly reached for the silver device on his belt. It was a high-tech bioscanner, used to identify dangerous life forms. His hand was shaking so much that he almost dropped it. He pointed the scanner at the sleeping cat cub and waited for the data to appear on his screen. The scanner began to beep softly, and red warning lights started flashing. Vax's heart hammered against his ribs. The screen showed a list of biological features that made him want to run out of the room. The scanner read, "Warning, apex predator detected." It listed traits like retractable bone blades for the claws and enhanced night vision for the eyes. The device even flagged the kitten's ears, noting that they could hear frequencies far beyond a normal alien's range. Vax swallowed hard. He looked at the human, Leo, who was still sitting very still. "Human Leo," Vax whispered, his voice cracking. "What is the meaning of this? Why have you brought a miniature killing machine into a high-security academy?" Leo looked up at the commander. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept all night. "Commander, please talk quietly," Leo said in a soft, urgent voice. "If you wake him up, we are both going to have a very long day." Vax misinterpreted this completely. He thought Leo meant that if the beast woke up, it would start a massacre. Vax took another step back, his boots clicking on the metal floor. Is it a biological weapon?" Vax asked. Leo shook his head inside. "No, he is just a ginger cat. A baby. On Earth, we call them kittens. He's my friend." Vax looked back at the scanner. The scanner was now analyzing the purr. On the screen, the sound wave was shown as a steady, low-frequency vibration. The computer labeled it as subsonic psychological warfare. Vax was convinced that the kitten was using this sound to paralyze its enemies or perhaps to brainwash the human. He couldn't understand how a creature so small could produce such a powerful, vibrating energy. "You call this a friend?" Vax hissed. "The data says this creature is designed for the hunt. It has teeth made for tearing flesh and silent paws for stalking its prey in the dark." Just then, the ginger kitten, Simba, moved. The suspense in the room became so thick you could almost touch it. Simba did not wake up fully, but he rolled over onto his back, exposing his soft, white and orange belly. To Leo, this was a sign of trust. To Vax, this was a trap. Vax watched as the kitten's tiny paws curled in the air. He saw the bone blades peek out from the fur for a second. They were small, but they looked incredibly sharp. Vax imagined those claws digging into his lizard-like skin. He stayed perfectly still, afraid that even a single breath would trigger an attack from the Deathworld beast. "Look," Leo said, trying to be helpful, "he's just sleeping. He found my tactical homework warm, so he decided to take a nap on it. I can't move him because, well, it's a rule on my planet. You don't move a sleeping cat." Vax's mind raced. He thought this was some kind of ancient human ritual. Perhaps the humans worshipped these orange creatures. Maybe the cat was a high-ranking officer in the human military, and Leo was just its servant. It made sense to Vax. Humans were the strongest warriors in the galaxy, so it only made sense that their gods would be even more dangerous and unpredictable. The alien commander looked at the homework tablet buried under the kitten's soft body. He needed those files for the morning briefing, but the apex predator was literally using the secrets of the human military as a pillow. Vax felt a wave of fear mixed with confusion. He had faced giant space monsters and survived starship battles, but he had never felt this much tension. Every time the kitten made a small mew sound in its sleep, Vax jumped. The sound was high-pitched and strange. He wondered if it was a secret code being sent to other Deathworlders. In the building, the suspense reached a peak when Simba's tail flicked and hit a metal cup on the desk. The cup made a loud clang sound. Vax screamed, a high, thin sound, and jumped onto a nearby chair, his forearms grabbing the ceiling lights. He waited for the orange monster to leap and strike. Simba simply opened one eye, looked at the shaking alien hanging from the ceiling, let out a tiny, bored yawn, and went back to sleep. Leo just put his head in his hands and groaned. Vax was now convinced, this was no ordinary animal. This was a creature that looked at a decorated galactic commander and felt nothing but boredom. This was the true power of Earth. Word of the Orange Terror spread through the cooling vents and communication links of the Academy like a wildfire. Within minutes, the long hallway outside room 402 was packed with students from dozens of different star systems. Huge, six-legged warriors from the desert moons and slim, blue-skinned scientists from the water worlds all stood behind the door frame, pushing and shoving to get a glimpse. They were too afraid to actually step inside the room. They saw Commander Vax, a veteran of 20 space battles, still standing near the wall with a look of pure confusion and fear. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the desk. To them, the tiny ginger kitten looked like a concentrated ball of orange fire. The way its whiskers moved in its sleep made them think it was scanning the room for targets with advanced sensors. One of the students, a tall alien with crystalline skin named Korg, whispered loudly, "Why does the Deathworlder not simply remove the pest? It is sitting on the military secrets of the Terran Command." Leo, the human, looked at the crowd with a very serious face. He realized that these aliens would never understand the concept of a pet. To them, everything was about power and survival. Leo decided to use this to his advantage. "I cannot move him," Leo said, his voice deep and dramatic. "This is the ancient law of the sleeping feline. On Earth, if the ginger one chooses a spot to rest, that spot becomes sacred ground. To disturb his sleep is to invite a level of chaos that no ship in this fleet could survive," the aliens gasped in unison. They started typing notes into their wrist computers, recording what they thought was a top-secret human military protocol. To them, the law of the sleeping feline sounded like a terrifying blood pact or a religious curse. They looked at the kitten with new eyes. They weren't looking at a baby animal anymore, they were looking at a tiny, furry dictator. The suspense grew as Simba, the kitten, began to dream. In his head, he was probably chasing a piece of string or a butterfly, but to the watching aliens, his movements were chilling. His tiny back legs kicked out, and his front paws began to knead the air. The aliens saw those tiny, white claws coming out and going back in. Click. 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 It was a rhythmic, deadly sound. "It is practicing its killing strikes," one alien whispered from the back of the crowd. "Look at the precision. It strikes even while it's resting. Its subconscious mind is a weapon." The crowd pushed back, nearly tripping over each other in the hallway. They were amazed that Leo could sit so close to those deadly paws without wearing any protective armor. They started to whisper that perhaps humans were not the true masters of Earth. Perhaps the humans were merely the servants or the bodyguards for these small, orange masters. Commander Vax finally found some courage and stepped closer to the desk, though he kept his hands ready to defend himself. "Human Leo," he said, trying to sound like a leader again. "If this law is so strict, how do your people ever get anything done? This creature is literally holding your education hostage. Leo looked at Simba, who was now snoring quite loudly. We wait, Leo replied simply. We wait until he decides our service is no longer required. On Earth, the cat's comfort is more important than the mission. The aliens were stunned. They imagined a planet where millions of these orange predators ruled over the humans, forcing them to sit still for hours just to use their own furniture. Suddenly, Simba's ears flicked toward the door. He didn't open his eyes, but his left ear turned 180 degrees to listen to the whispering crowd. The entire hallway went silent instantly. Dozens of powerful, armored aliens held their breath, terrified that the Orange Terror had detected their presence. The suspense was so heavy that one alien student actually fainted from the stress and had to be carried away quietly. Simba let out a soft, tiny huff through his nose and settled deeper into the homework papers, his tail twitching once. The aliens looked at each other in shock. They realized that the kitten had judged an entire hallway of warriors and decided they were not even worth waking up for. This was the ultimate display of power. To an alien, being ignored was a sign of total superiority. The atmosphere in the room was so tense that it felt like the air itself might snap. Dozens of aliens were huddled in the doorway, their sensors and scanning devices pointed directly at the sleeping ginger kitten. Suddenly, Simba's tiny pink nose twitched. One of his whiskers vibrated, and a collective gasp went through the crowd of aliens. The beast is stirred, a voice whispered in terror from the back. Simba slowly opened his eyes. They were a bright, piercing emerald green. To the aliens, these were not the innocent eyes of a baby animal, they were the targeting sensors of a biological weapon. Simba did not look confused or scared. He looked around the room with a calm, cold gaze that seemed to judge everyone present. Then, it happened. The vibrating sound that Vax had heard earlier started again, but this time it was much louder. As Leo reached out a hand to gently stroke the kitten's head, Simba began to purr. To a human, it was the sound of a happy pet. To the aliens and their sensitive equipment, it was a low-frequency sonic event. Commander Vax looked down at his bioscanner, and his face turned a pale shade of blue. The screen was flashing a bright purple warning, massive energy resonance detected. Frequency, subsonic. Effect, unknown. Vax's hand started to shake so violently that he almost dropped the scanner. It's a sonic pulse. Vax shouted to the students. The creature is emitting a low-frequency wave. It's trying to scramble our internal organs. Panic began to rise among the students. They felt the soft rumble in the floor beneath their feet. Because their bodies were made of different materials, some were liquid, some were crystalline, and some were metallic, the purring felt different to each of them. To the crystalline aliens, the purr felt like a vibration that might shatter their bodies. To the liquid-based aliens, it felt like their very essence was being stirred. They all believed that the Orange Terror was warming up its main engine for a devastating attack. They watched in horror as Leo, the Deathworlder, stayed perfectly calm. In fact, Leo closed his eyes and looked relaxed. He's immune, one alien cried out. The human has evolved to survive the sonic blasts of the beast. He is using the vibration to recharge his own strength. Leo looked up at the crowd, seeing the fear in their eyes. He decided to explain, though it only made the suspense worse. He's just happy, Leo said with a small smile. When a cat purrs like this, it means they feel safe. It's a sign of friendship. Commander Vax didn't believe a word of it. He had seen many friendly things in the galaxy that turned out to be deadly. He watched as the kitten's throat moved with every deep rumble. You call this friendship? Vax asked, his voice trembling. My sensors say this vibration is powerful enough to be felt through 2 inches of reinforced steel. If this is how it sounds when it is happy, I do not want to see the energy it releases when it is angry. The suspense reached a new level when Simba suddenly stopped purring. The silence that followed was even more frightening than the sound. The kitten sat up on the homework papers, arched its back in a massive stretch, and let out a tiny, high-pitched mew. The sound was so sharp and unexpected that 3 alien students fell backward into the hallway. They thought it was a high-frequency kill code. Simba then looked at Commander Vax. He jumped off the desk with amazing grace, landing silently on the floor. He began to walk toward the commander with slow, deliberate steps. Each step was silent. The bone blades were hidden, but everyone knew they were there. Vax backed away until he hit the wall. He was a high-ranking officer, but he was currently being hunted by a 4-pound ball of orange fur. Simba stopped just inches from Vax's heavy metallic boots. The kitten looked up, tilted its head, and sniffed the commander's leg. The entire hallway held its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all expected that apex predator to take a bite out of the commander's leg or release a cloud of poison. Instead, Simba rubbed his soft cheek against Vax's boot, leaving a bit of orange fur behind. Vax froze, his heart stopping for a second. "He has marked me," Vax whispered, his eyes wide with horror. "The Deathworlder's beast has marked me for death. I am now his chosen target." The crowd of aliens at the door suddenly parted as a massive figure pushed its way to the front. It was Zark, a giant warrior from the planet Krull. Zark was nearly 7 feet tall, covered in thick, dark scales, and had 4 powerful arms. On his planet, the only thing that mattered was strength. He looked at the trembling Commander Vax and then at the tiny ginger kitten on the floor, and he let out a loud, mocking laugh. "You are all cowards." Zark roared, his voice echoing through the metal hallway. "This is what you are afraid of? This tiny, soft puff of orange hair? I have hunted monsters 10 times the size of this thing," the other aliens whispered in fear. They knew Zark was a professional fighter, but they also knew that Earth animals were different. Human Leo stood up from his chair, his face showing a mix of worry and amusement. "Zark, I'm telling you, stay back," Leo warned. "He is in a very active mood right now. He's been sleeping all day, and he has a lot of energy." To the aliens, this sounded like a terrifying warning. They thought Leo was saying that Beast was hungry and looking for a fight. But Zark did not listen. He stepped into the room, his heavy boots making the floor shake. He wanted to show everyone that a warrior from Krull was superior to any creature from a Deathworld. Simba, the kitten, looked up at the giant lizard man. To Simba, Zark did not look like a scary warrior, he looked like a giant climbing tree. Simba's eyes changed instantly. His pupils became big, black circles, covering almost all of the green. This was the look of a hunter. The aliens watching from the door gripped their scanners. "Look at the eyes," someone shouted. "The creature has activated its combat mode. It is locking onto a target." Simba lowered his body close to the floor, his bottom wiggling slightly as he prepared to pounce. The suspense in the room was so thick that even the air felt heavy. Zark reached down with one of his massive, clawed hands. He intended to pick Simba up by the neck to show how weak the kitten was. "See?" Zark sneered. "I will crush this little." Before he could finish his sentence, Simba moved. To the aliens, it was nothing but an orange blur. Simba launched himself into the air with incredible speed. He didn't move like a normal animal, he seemed to defy gravity. He landed right on Zark's thick, armored arm and began his attack. Simba used his tiny, needle-sharp claws to climb up Zark's shoulder. Then, he did something that made every alien in the room scream in horror. He began to bunny kick. This is when a kitten uses its powerful back legs to kick rapidly. To a human, it's a cute way of playing. To the aliens, it looked like a high-speed shredding machine. Simba was kicking Zark's heavy armor with such speed that it made a rhythmic thump-thump-thump sound. Simba then leaned forward and gave Zark's thick neck a tiny, playful, love bite. Zark's eyes went wide. He felt the tiny, sharp teeth and the scratching of the claws. He had never felt anything like this. It wasn't just the pain, it was the sheer speed and the lack of fear in the kitten. Zark realized that this tiny creature was not afraid of his size or his strength. He panicked. He thought the kitten was injecting him with a slow-acting poison or looking for a soft spot to end his life. "Get it off!" Zark screamed, his voice turning into a high-pitched yell. He began to spin around in circles, trying to shake the kitten off, but Simba held on tight, thinking this was a great new game. The aliens in the hallway watched in total shock. They saw their strongest warrior being defeated by a 4-pound orange terror. To them, it looked like a masterful display of Earth combat. The kitten was staying on the blind side of the giant, attacking with precision and speed. Finally, Zark became so dizzy and so terrified that his legs gave out. He fell to the floor with a massive crash, fainting from pure psychological shock. Simba lightly hopped off the fallen giant, sat down next to his head, and began to calmly lick his own paw, as if nothing had happened. The room went silent. The apex predator had won. The silence in the room was heavier than the gravity of a dead star. The giant warrior Zark lay unconscious on the floor, and the tiny ginger kitten, Simba, was calmly cleaning his orange fur. To the hundreds of aliens watching, this was the most terrifying thing they had ever seen. They didn't see a cute animal, they saw a victor. Commander Vax stepped forward, his legs still shaking, but his curiosity was now stronger than his fear. He looked at Human Leo, who was finally picking up his homework tablet from the desk. "Human Leo," Vax said, his voice a whisper. "Explain this to me. How can your species live with such a creature? It defeated our strongest warrior without even trying. It emits sonic waves that scramble our sensors. And yet, you treat it like a baby." Leo looked at the tiny kitten and then back at the commander. He decided it was time to tell them the truth about Earth. "In the galaxy, you all think we are dangerous because we come from a death world," Leo began, his voice calm and soft. "You think we survive because we are the biggest or the meanest. But that's not it. Humans are dangerous because we don't see enemies, we see friends. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors saw these predators in the wild. Instead of killing them, we shared our food with them. Instead of fighting them, we invited them into our homes. We didn't conquer the cat, we made a deal with it. We give them love, and they give us, well, they give us this." He pointed to Simba, who was now chasing his own tail in a circle. The aliens in the hallway leaned in, their minds blown by this information. They had spent their entire lives building shields and weapons to protect themselves from predators. The idea of inviting a predator into your home was completely insane to them. Commander Vax looked at the bioscanner in his hand one last time. It still read Apex Predator, but now he saw something else. He saw the way the kitten looked at Leo with trust. Vax realized the ultimate secret of the humans: their true power was not their muscles or their guns. Their true power was their ability to turn a killing machine into a sleeping companion. They were the only species in the universe brave enough to love something that could easily kill them. Simba finished cleaning his paw and looked up at Commander Vax. The commander froze, thinking his time had come. But instead of jumping or biting, the kitten walked over and sat on Vax's metallic boot. Simba looked up and let out a soft, tired mew. Then, with a long yawn, the kitten climbed up Vax's leg, using his tiny claws to grip the fabric of the uniform. Vax stayed perfectly still, his heart racing. Simba climbed all the way to Vax's shoulder, turned around 3 times, and curled into a ball right against the commander's neck. The low-frequency attack, the purring, started again. Vax felt the vibration against his skin, and for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. He felt peaceful. "He likes you, Commander," Leo said with a grin. "He thinks you are a good place for a nap." Vax looked at the other aliens in the hallway. They were all staring at him with eyes full of wonder. The legendary Orange Terror was now sleeping on their commander. Vax slowly reached up one of his 4 hands. He hesitated for a second, then gently touched the soft orange fur with his finger. It was the softest thing he had ever felt in the entire galaxy. He realized that the Deathworlder had not brought a weapon to the academy, he had brought a lesson. The lesson was that sometimes, the best way to handle a monster is to give it a place to sleep. Vax opened his digital pad and began to write his final report for the Galactic Council. He wrote, "Recommendation, do not ever go to war with humans. Not because they have big ships, but because they have the heart to tame the wildest spirits in the universe. If they can make a friend out of the Ginger Predator, they can win any battle without firing a single shot. Also, please send more tuna to room 402. It is a matter of galactic security." The story of the Orange Terror became a legend at the Academy, and from that day on, no one ever dared to disturb a human while they were doing their homework, just in case their tiny, furry master was watching.